Welcome to the Thrifty Tips podcast. Today we're diving into something pretty interesting.
Okay.
A world where chickens can thrive without all those medications that we tend to think are so essential. So we're talking Amish chicken wisdom and how you can apply it to your own flock for healthier and happier birds. I mean, imagine this, tapping into centuries-old knowledge to raise your chickens the natural way.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Our source for this fascinating deep dive is a podcast script called Back to Basics, Amish Methods for Healthy Chickens.
that sounds really interesting.
Right.
You know what's really cool about the Amish approach is how deeply rooted it is in their lifestyle. Simplicity, self-sufficiency, and a true harmony with nature. These are like core values to them, and it really extends to their farming practices as well.
It's like their approach to raising chickens is just an extension of their whole way of life.
Exactly. And the script we're looking at highlights three key pillars of their method: biosecurity, natural remedies, and something they call environmental harmony. And each one of these pillars works with the others to create this incredibly resilient system.
Okay, so let's break these down a little bit. Biosecurity sounds a little intense. What exactly does that entail for the Amish?
Well, it's all about minimizing the risk of disease. And they do this through a few key practices.
Right.
First, they keep smaller flocks, and that naturally limits the spread of any potential illness.
Smaller flocks, smaller problems.
Exactly. And then they also separate different types of poultry, like, chickens, ducks, geese, to reduce that transmission of pathogens between species.
That makes a lot of sense. Less crowding, less chance of something spreading like wildfire.
Precisely. And then there's rotational grazing. This involves moving the chickens to fresh pasture pretty regularly, which helps to break the life cycle of parasites and reduces their exposure to contaminated ground.
So it's like they're constantly giving these chickens a fresh, clean start.
Exactly. And they're incredibly meticulous about sanitation, too. Tools are regularly cleaned, and they really limit visitors to their coops to prevent outside contamination.
So they're really creating like this controlled environment. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Thrifty Tips podcast for more fascinating deep dives into topics just like this. Okay, so we've got this fortress of biosecurity, but they don't stop there, do they?
Oh, no.
Tell me about these natural remedies.
This is where it gets really interesting. The Amish, they have a deep understanding of the power of natural ingredients. Garlic, for instance, is a staple in their chicken care routine. It's a natural antibacterial and antiviral agent.
I use garlic in my cooking all the time, but I never really thought about giving it to my chickens.
Well, you should, and they use oregano, too, which has powerful antifungal properties. Apple cider vinegar is another favorite. It helps balance the pH levels in the chicken's gut, creating an environment that's much less hospitable to harmful bacteria.
So they're not just treating symptoms here, they're proactively boosting the chicken's natural defenses from the inside out.
Exactly. And we can't forget probiotics. Just like us humans, chickens benefit from a healthy gut microbiome. The Amish, they incorporate probiotics into their chicken's diet through fermented grains and other probiotic-rich foods.
Now, I've heard about the benefits of probiotics for people, but I'm curious, what kind of probiotic-rich foods are we talking about for chickens?
Well, think about things like fermented dairy products. Yogurt, for instance. Even something as simple as adding a little bit of yogurt to their feed can introduce those beneficial bacteria to their system. And fermented grains like sprouted barley or oats are great options too.
So they're really tapping into this whole world of fermented foods that we're hearing so much about these days. It's like the Amish are ahead of the curve on gut health.
Absolutely. And it all ties back to their focus on natural, holistic approaches. It's not about quick fixes. It's about fostering long-term health and resilience.
No, we can't forget about the third pillar, environmental harmony. This sounds pretty idyllic, but what does it actually look like in practice?
Think wide open spaces, fresh air, sunshine. The Amish prioritize free ranging, which allows the chickens to engage in their natural behaviors. They can forage for insects and seeds, dust bathe, and basically just be chickens. This is a stark contrast to the often cramped and confined conditions of industrial farming.
Right, it's like giving them the freedom to express their chickenness.
Exactly. And this freedom has a direct impact on their health. They're getting exercise, fresh air, and a more diverse diet through foraging. All of this contributes to stronger immunity.
It makes me wonder, do they ever worry about predators with their chickens just roaming free?
Of course, predators are always a concern, but the Amish, they've developed strategies to mitigate that risk. They often use livestock guardian dogs, for instance, to protect the flock, and they also design their coops with security in mind. They're typically elevated off the ground and have sturdy construction to deter predators.
So they're not naive to the challenges. They just approach them with a different mindset. It's about working with nature, not against it.
That's a great way to put it. And the coop environment itself is a big part of this. The Amish ensure their coops are well ventilated with ample sunlight and clean bedding. This creates a healthy and hygienic living space that further reduces the risk of disease.
If you're enjoying this deep dive into Amish chicken wisdom, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the Thirsty Tips podcast for more. We've got a whole library of episodes covering fascinating topics just like this. Okay, so we've covered the 3 pillars, but I think a lot of listeners are probably wondering, does this approach really work? Is it just a quaint tradition, or is there real evidence to back it up?
Well, it's important to remember that the Amish have been successfully raising chickens this way for generations. Their practices have been honed and refined over time through observation and experience. And while there may not be a ton of formal scientific studies on Amish chicken raising specifically, there's a growing body of research that supports the principles behind their methods.
For example,
Studies have shown that free-ranging chickens have lower stress levels and stronger immune systems compared to their confined counterparts. And the benefits of natural ingredients like garlic and oregano for boosting immunity and fighting infections are well documented.
so it's not just anecdotal evidence. There's real science backing up these traditional practices.
Precisely. And it's important to acknowledge that the Amish aren't opposed to modern veterinary care. If a chicken does become sick, they'll seek treatment. But their primary focus is on prevention, on creating an environment where chickens can thrive naturally.
It's a bit like the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But I'm sure some listeners are thinking, this all sounds great, but I don't live on a farm. Can I really apply these principles to my backyard flock?
Absolutely. That's the beauty of these methods. They're adaptable. You might not be able to replicate the Amish way of life perfectly, but you can certainly incorporate some of their key principles into your own chicken raising practices.
What would be some good starting points for someone with a small backyard setup?
We'll focus on the basics. Coop cleanliness is paramount. Make sure you're regularly cleaning the coop, providing fresh bedding, and ensuring good ventilation.
Right, because even if you have a small flock, a dirty coop can quickly become a breeding ground for disease.
Exactly. And even if you don't have acres of pasture for rotational grazing, you can still give your chickens access to fresh ground by moving their coop and run regularly.
That makes sense. And what about natural remedies? Are those safe and effective for backyard chickens?
Definitely. Start by incorporating things like garlic and oregano into their feed. Apple cider vinegar in their water is another easy addition. You can find plenty of recipes online for natural chicken tonics using these ingredients. And look for feed that contains probiotics, or consider adding a bit of yogurt to their diet.
So even small changes can make a big difference.
Exactly.
It's about taking those baby steps toward a more natural approach.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the power of observation. Spend time watching your chickens. Get to know their behaviors, their personalities. You'll start to notice subtle signs of illness or stress that you might have missed before.
That's such a good point. It's like becoming a chicken whisperer, tuning into their needs. And speaking of tuning in, I'm sure some listeners are curious about the cost-effectiveness of all this. Natural remedies sound great, but can they really compete with conventional medications in terms of price?
That's a valid question, and honestly, it depends. The initial investment in setting up a system like this with things like rotational grazing equipment or sourcing high-quality organic feed might seem higher up front.
Right, especially if you're used to just grabbing a bag of conventional feed at the store.
But here's the thing. If you're successfully preventing disease by creating a healthy environment and boosting your chicken's natural immunity, you're likely to save money on vet bills and medications in the long run.
It's like investing in preventative health care for your chickens, which could lead to significant savings down the line.
Exactly. And there's another factor to consider, the quality of the food you're getting. Chickens raised on a natural diet free from antibiotics and other medications often produce eggs and meat that are not only healthier but also tastier.
So it's not just about cost savings. It's about the quality and ethics of the food we consume.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And let's not forget the satisfaction that comes from knowing you're providing your chickens with the best possible care. There's a real sense of accomplishment in raising healthy, happy birds using natural methods.
If you're enjoying this deep dive into Amish chicken wisdom, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the Thrifty Tips podcast for more. We release new episodes every week packed with practical tips and fascinating insights to help you live a more fulfilling and sustainable life. So to wrap things up, what's the one big takeaway you'd want our listeners to walk away with today? What's the essence of this Amish chicken wisdom?
I think it boils down to this. Simple nature-based solutions can be surprisingly effective. The Amish have shown us that we don't always need to rely on complex, expensive interventions to achieve health and well-being for our flocks.
It's a reminder that sometimes the answers are right in front of us, in the natural world and in the wisdom of traditional practices.
Exactly. And it begs the question, what other areas of our lives could benefit from a back-to-basics approach? Our gardens, our diets, our overall well-being, the possibilities are endless.
That's such a thought-provoking question to end on. Something for all of us to ponder as we go about our day. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Amish chicken wisdom. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even feel inspired to try out some of these techniques with your own flock.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
Thank you for listening to the Thrifty Tips podcast. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into intriguing topics. We'll see you next time.